Tonight, we have a story that seems almost impossible. A story so strange, so unlikely, that when you first hear it, you might think it's fiction. But it's real, it happened. And it happened to a man named Roy Sullivan. Roy Sullivan was struck by lightning 7 times and survived every single strike. 7 times. Not once, not twice. 7 times the sky opened up and electricity coursed through his body with enough power to kill him, and 7 times he survived. This is not a story about luck, exactly. It's a story about something deeper. It's a story about a man learning to live with something that shouldn't be survivable. It's a story about what happens when the impossible becomes your life. Close your eyes, let yourself drift into a story about lightning and survival, about a man learning to live with fear and acceptance, about the strange intersection of fate and choice, of danger and duty. And let yourself rest knowing that this is a story about someone who faced the most extreme circumstances and found a way to keep living. The ordinary man who was Roy Sullivan. Roy Sullivan was born in 1912 in Greene County, Virginia. He was an ordinary man. He wasn't famous, he wasn't particularly ambitious. He was a quiet person who grew up in rural Appalachia, in a time and place where life was simple and expectations were modest. His father worked as a coal miner. His mother managed the home. Roy had brothers and sisters. He grew up in a close-knit community where people knew each other, where families had roots that went back generations, where the landscape was both beautiful and harsh. Roy was not tall, he was not particularly strong, though he was capable. He had a steady demeanor. He wasn't flashy or dramatic. He was the kind of person you might pass on the street and not notice, unremarkable in almost every way. But Roy had one thing that would define his entire life. He chose a profession that would put him in the path of lightning more than almost anyone else on Earth. 1936, at age 24, Roy Sullivan became a park ranger for Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. The park ranger, a life among the mountains. Shenandoah National Park is beautiful. It's mountainous, forested, dramatic. The Blue Ridge Mountains rise up in layers, creating a landscape of stunning beauty. Valleys and peaks, waterfalls and streams, dense forests and open overlooks. But Shenandoah is also dangerous. The mountains create their own weather. Storms come suddenly. Lightning is a constant danger in the high elevations. Every ranger knows this. Every ranger accepts this risk. A park ranger's job is to maintain the trails, protect the forest, help visitors, and manage the park. Roy did this work faithfully for years. He walked the trails, he maintained them, he helped lost hikers, he enforced park rules. He lived in the mountains, in the place where his work was needed. For the first 20 years of his career, Roy was struck by lightning 0 times. He was lucky in the way most people are lucky. He avoided danger. He was careful. He was aware. He lived his life and nothing extraordinary happened. Then, in 1956, everything changed. The first strike. 1956. Roy Sullivan was 34 years old when he was struck by lightning for the first time. It was July, summer in the mountains. The weather had been building all day, clouds gathering, the air growing heavy and electric. Roy was working, doing his job, walking the trails, maintaining the park. He didn't see the lightning coming. Lightning is fast. You don't have time to see it coming. One moment you're walking, doing your work, thinking about something ordinary. The next moment the sky opens up and electricity fills your body. The lightning hit him directly. It entered through the top of his head and exited through his feet. The electricity coursed through every system in his body. His heart stopped, his muscles seized, he fell to the ground. And somehow he survived. Lightning caused burns, it caused trauma to his body. It caused pain that was almost unimaginable, but it didn't kill him. His body, through some combination of luck and physiology, continued to function. His heart restarted. He regained consciousness. Roy was hospitalized. He recovered. The burns healed. The trauma faded. After weeks of recovery, he returned to work. He was struck by lightning once. He survived. Most people who are struck by lightning once never get struck again. The odds of being struck twice are astronomical. Roy understood this. He returned to his life. He returned to his work in the mountains. He had no reason to believe this would happen again. The second strike. 1969. 13 years passed. 13 years without lightning striking Roy Sullivan. In those 13 years, Roy aged. He went from 34 to 47. He continued his work as a park ranger. He maintained trails, he helped visitors, he lived in the mountains. He lived an ordinary life marked by ordinary days. Then, on July 27, 1969, Roy was struck by lightning for the second time. Again he was working. Again the lightning came suddenly. Again the electricity filled his body. Again his heart stopped. Again he survived. But now something changed. Now it wasn't just chance. Now it was a pattern. Now Roy understood that something unusual was happening. He had been struck by lightning twice. The odds of this were not just low, they were impossibly, astronomically low. Roy was hospitalized again. He recovered again. The burns healed, the trauma faded. But something in Roy had changed. He was no longer just an ordinary man who had an extraordinary accident. He was a man who had been struck by lightning twice. People began to talk about him. The local newspapers picked up the story. Local ranger struck by lightning twice. It was a curiosity. A strange story, not quite believable, but documented. Roy returned to work. But now he worked with a different awareness. He knew lightning could find him. He had been struck twice. Was he cursed? Was he doomed? Or was he somehow protected by the same force that had nearly killed him? The third strike. 1973. In 1973, Roy was struck by lightning for the fourth time. By now, Roy had become something of a local legend, the ranger who gets struck by lightning. People asked him about it, people wondered, people speculated about why. Was he cursed? Was he chosen? Was he somehow a conductor for the sky? Roy didn't have answers. He only knew that the lightning kept coming. He could feel it building in the air sometimes. He would sense the electricity in the atmosphere and know that danger was approaching. But he couldn't escape. He couldn't hide. The lightning found him anyway. After the fourth strike, Roy began to wonder about his fate. Was he meant to survive these strikes? Was there a reason? Was there a purpose? Or was it just random chance repeated over and over? The fifth strike, 1973. In 1973, Roy was struck by lightning for the fifth time. 3 strikes in 3 years. The frequency was increasing. The lightning was striking more often. Roy was no longer recovering between strikes with the luxury of years. Now the strikes were coming annually, sometimes multiple times in a year. Roy's body bore the cumulative trauma of 5 lightning strikes. Burns, neurological damage, hair burned off, eyebrows burned off, fingernails damaged, physical scars marking his body as a map of his encounters with lightning. But Roy continued working. He continued his job as a park ranger. He continued walking the mountains. He continued doing his duty, even though the sky itself seemed to be trying to kill him. People began to wonder, why didn't Roy quit? Why didn't he leave the mountains? Why didn't he find work somewhere safer? Roy didn't have a good answer. The mountains were his home. His job was his identity. Leaving would mean becoming someone else, and Roy didn't know how to be anyone else. Part 2. The accumulation. Living with constant danger. The pattern emerges. By the mid-1970s, a pattern had emerged in Roy's lightning strikes. They happened in summer. They happened when Roy was working in the mountains. They happened suddenly, without warning. They happened with increasing frequency. Roy began to understand his own phenomenon. He was not invulnerable. The lightning didn't kill him, but it damaged him. Each strike left scars, physically and psychologically. Each strike was traumatic. Each strike was pain and fear and the brush with death. But Roy survived them all. Scientists became interested. How was Roy surviving? What was different about his body, his physiology, his luck? Was there something about him that made him immune to death by lightning? Researchers wanted to study him. Doctors wanted to examine him. Roy became a subject of medical curiosity. the man who couldn't be killed by lightning. But Roy didn't have answers for them. He didn't know why he survived. He only knew that he did. The psychological toll. What people didn't talk about much was the psychological toll. Yes, Roy survived the physical strikes. Yes, his body recovered. But what about his mind? Roy lived with the constant knowledge that lightning could strike him at any moment. He lived with fear. Not irrational fear, but rational, justified fear. The lightning had struck 5 times. Why not a 6th? Why not more? He couldn't prevent the strikes. He couldn't hide from them. He could only live with the knowledge that they were coming. Some people would have quit. Some people would have fled. Some people would have broken under the psychological pressure. But Roy didn't. Roy continued working. Roy continued living in the mountains. Roy continued doing his job. Was this courage? Was this acceptance? Was this resignation? Roy himself didn't know. He only knew that he had chosen to keep living his life, even though the sky was trying to kill him. The 6th strike, 1976. In 1977, at age 65, Roy Sullivan was struck by lightning for the 7th time. 7 strikes, 21 years of being struck by lightning. The final strike happened near a pond, and Roy was badly burned. His hair caught fire. He was injured severely, but once again he survived. After the 7th strike, Roy decided it was time to retire. He had worked as a park ranger for over 40 years. He had been struck by lightning 7 times. His body was tired. His mind was tired. It was time to step away from the mountains. Roy retired from the National Park Service. He left his job. He left the mountains where the lightning had found him again and again. Part 3. The Aftermath. Living after the lightning. The quiet years after retirement, Roy moved away from the mountains. He moved to a quieter place. He tried to build a normal life, though he was no longer a normal man. He was famous now, in a strange way. He was known as the man struck by lightning 7 times. Guinness Book of World Records recognized him. Scientists studied his case. Medical journals published papers about him. But Roy just wanted to live quietly. He had spent decades in danger. He wanted peace now. He wanted normalcy. He lived simply. He didn't travel much. He avoided outdoor activities. He was cautious about storms. After being struck 7 times, he understood the power of weather in a way that most people never would. Roy never married. He lived alone. He had his memories of the mountains, his memories of the lightning, his memories of the repeated brushes with death. The psychological aftermath. What people rarely discussed was how Roy's repeated trauma affected his mind. He had survived lightning strikes, yes, but survival comes with a cost. Roy likely suffered from PTSD. He likely had anxiety about storms. He likely carried trauma that never fully healed. The repeated near-death experiences would mark any person. Roy was marked. But Roy didn't complain. He didn't seek sympathy. He simply lived his life. He became a quiet man living a quiet life in the shadow of what had happened to him. He gave occasional interviews. He spoke about his experience. He told people what it felt like to be struck by lightning. He described the heat, the pain, the feeling of death approaching. But mostly, he tried to move on. The final years. In his final years, Roy lived in a small town. He was elderly now. His body bore the cumulative effects of 7 lightning strikes and 65 years of life. He was tired. He was worn down by what he had survived. On June 25, 1994, at age 81, Roy Sullivan died. Not from lightning, not from the cumulative effects of electrical trauma, from something simpler. A gunshot wound, self-inflicted. The man who had survived 7 lightning strikes, who had cheated death again and again, who had lived in the mountains and in the face of constant danger, he ended his own life. It was a tragic end to a remarkable story. Roy had survived the impossible, but perhaps the toll of that survival was too great. Perhaps the trauma of being struck by lightning 7 times, of living in constant fear, of being marked as unusual and different, perhaps that cost him in ways that were invisible, but real. Part 1. Understanding the phenomenon, the science of lightning strikes. Lightning is one of the most powerful forces in nature. A single lightning strike carries about 1 billion volts of electricity and can reach temperatures of 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than the surface of the sun. When lightning strikes a person, it causes immediate, severe damage. The electrical current disrupts the heart's rhythm, causing cardiac arrest. It burns tissue. It damages the nervous system. It causes trauma that should be instantly fatal. Yet some people survive lightning strikes. About 90% of people struck by lightning survive. But surviving once is one thing. Surviving 7 times is something else entirely. Why did Roy survive? Scientists studied Roy's case, trying to understand why he survived. Several factors may have contributed. Immediate help. Roy was a park ranger working in a park. When he was struck, help was usually nearby. He received quick medical attention, which increases survival rates. Physiology. Some people's bodies are more resistant to electrical damage than others. Roy may have had physiology that made him less susceptible to fatal damage from lightning. Luck. The path the lightning took through his body made a difference. A direct hit through the heart is almost always fatal. Roy's strikes may have avoided the most critical areas, though they still caused severe damage. The ground effect. Footwear, the ground conditions, and other factors affect how electricity flows through a body. Roy may have had circumstances that allowed him to survive strikes that would kill others. The rarity of multiple strikes. The odds of being struck by lightning once in your lifetime are about 1 in 500,000. The odds of being struck twice are exponentially lower. The odds of being struck 7 times are so low that they're almost incomprehensible. If we calculate the probability, 1 in 500,000, multiplied by itself 6 more times for 7 total strikes, the odds are approximately 1 in 10 to the 33rd power. That's a number with 33 zeros after it. It's a number so large that it's almost meaningless. Roy Sullivan beat odds that were functionally impossible. He did something that, statistically, should never have happened. What does it mean? So what does Roy Sullivan's life teach us? What can we learn from a man struck by lightning 7 times? 1. Resilience beyond belief. Roy showed that humans can survive almost anything. His body and mind were tested repeatedly, and repeatedly they endured. This speaks to something fundamental about human resilience. The limits of control. Roy couldn't control the lightning. He couldn't prevent the strikes. He could only survive them. His story reminds us that there are forces in life beyond our control, and we must learn to live with them. The cost of survival. Roy survived the lightning, but survival came at a cost. Trauma, scars, psychological damage, fear. His story reminds us that survival is not a simple victory. It's complicated and painful. The randomness of fate. Why was Roy struck by lightning 7 times while millions of others are never struck once? There's no fair answer. There's no reason. It was random chance, played out over and over. Roy's story reminds us that life is not always fair, not always rational, not always understandable. The weight of being different. Roy became famous for something he didn't choose. He became a curiosity, a phenomenon, a case study. Being different, being marked by fate, came with a burden. His story reminds us that being unusual can be isolating. Part 5. Meditation. What Roy's life means for us. The paradox of survival. Roy Sullivan lived a paradoxical life. He survived something that should have killed him, not once but 7 times. He became simultaneously more resilient and more fragile. He was marked by what he survived, changed by it, defined by it. His story raises questions that don't have easy answers. Is surviving a catastrophe 7 times a blessing or a curse? What does it mean to live in the constant shadow of danger? How do you build meaning in a life defined by random chance? What is the cost of being different, of being marked by fate? Roy didn't have answers to these questions. He only lived them. The meaning of lightning. Lightning is a metaphor for many things. It's sudden, it's powerful, it's dangerous, it's beautiful, it's unpredictable. It comes from above, from the sky, from forces we don't control. In many spiritual traditions, lightning is a sign of divine power, a sign of change, a sign of awakening or destruction. Roy's repeated strikes by lightning could be understood as a metaphor for something larger. What is the lightning in your life? What is the force that keeps striking at you again and again? What is the thing you can't control, can't prevent, can only survive? For Roy, it was literally lightning. For others, it might be illness, loss, heartbreak, trauma, or struggle. The external force varies, but the internal experience is similar. Being struck by something powerful, surviving it, being changed by it, and having to figure out how to live with the scars. The choice to continue. What strikes us most about Roy's story is that after each strike, he chose to continue. He didn't leave the mountains until he retired. He didn't hide from storms. He didn't give up. Was this courage? Was this resignation? Was this acceptance? Roy himself didn't label it. He only lived it. In each of our lives, we face moments of loss, trauma, and difficulty. We face things that strike us like lightning, sudden, powerful, beyond our control. And in those moments, we have a choice. Do we continue or do we give up? Roy's answer was to continue. Until finally, after surviving what should have killed him 7 times, the burden became too great and he chose to stop. His story doesn't offer an easy moral. It doesn't say just keep going or everything will be fine. It says something harder. Survival is possible, but it comes at a cost. Resilience is real, but it's not infinite. We can endure almost anything, but endurance itself can wear us down. The quiet heroism of simply living. Roy Sullivan was not a traditional hero. He didn't defeat an enemy. He didn't accomplish great things. He just survived. He just kept going. He did his job. He lived his life. He endured. And in a world that often demands grand achievements and dramatic victories, there's something heroic about that. There's something noble about simply showing up, simply continuing, simply refusing to break, even when you're being struck by lightning. Roy's heroism was quiet. It was invisible to most people. It was the kind of heroism that doesn't make headlines but speaks to something fundamental about human resilience. Part 6. The Farewell Remembering Roy Sullivan. Roy Sullivan died in 1994. He's been dead for 30 years now. But his story remains. His record remains. He was struck by lightning 7 times, and he survived. No one else has come close to this record. No one else has been struck so many times and survived so consistently. Roy's record stands alone. He remains the only person to have survived 7 lightning strikes. His story has become a curiosity, a footnote in medical history, a strange fact that people mention occasionally. Did you know there was a guy struck by lightning 7 times? It's become the kind of thing people say to astound their friends. But Roy was more than a fact. He was a person. He was a man who lived in the mountains. He did his job. He survived something impossible. He carried that survival with him every day for decades. He bore the scars, the trauma, the fear, the strangeness of being marked by fate in such an unusual way. And then, when the burden became too great, he made a choice to end it. What endures? What endures from Roy's story is not a moral lesson or a clear answer to why this happened. What endures is the basic fact of his survival, and all the questions that fact raises. It endures as a reminder that humans are more resilient than we believe, that we can survive things that should kill us, that the body and mind are capable of extraordinary endurance. It endures as a reminder that survival is not simple, that being marked by fate can be a burden as much as a blessing, that living with constant danger takes a psychological toll that doesn't show on the outside. It endures as a reminder that life is not always fair, that bad things happen randomly, that we are not always in control, that we can only do our best to survive what comes at us. Sleep knowing about resilience. As you drift into sleep tonight, carrying Roy's story with you, think about what resilience means. Think about what it means to survive. Think about the silent battles that people fight, the invisible scars they carry, the courage it takes to simply keep going. Roy Sullivan was struck by lightning 7 times. He survived, he lived, and then he died. His story is ended, but its meaning continues. Think about the lightning in your own life. Think about what strikes you. Think about how you survive. Think about the strength you didn't know you had until you needed it. And sleep peacefully knowing that humans are remarkable, that we endure, that we survive, not because life is fair or kind, but because something in us refuses to break. Thank you for joining us on this journey with Roy Sullivan, the man who was struck by lightning 7 times. Thank you for being present with him through his extraordinary, tragic, remarkable life. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe. We have more stories crafted weekly. As you sleep tonight, you carry with you the knowledge that Roy Sullivan survived what should have killed him 7 times, that humans are stronger than we think, that resilience is real and powerful, and you carry with you the more difficult knowledge that survival comes at a cost, that resilience is not infinite, that sometimes, even after surviving the impossible, the burden becomes too great. Sleep well. May you rest peacefully knowing your own strength. May you be gentle with yourself and others who carry invisible scars. May you understand that simply continuing, simply showing up, simply refusing to break, that is heroism. Good night from the Deep Sleep Channel. Sleep well.